Hello, hello, hello. Today I want to talk about something that is a little bit different. Uh, Not so different from yesterday, but I wanted to kind of push. I want to kind of push myself to thinking a little bit beyond what I'm used to thinking. I'm probably going to say a lot of things that are wrong, or I'm probably going to say a lot of things that are contradictory to some other points that I make. But it's kind of prompted from a video that I started watching today, which was is every are things getting better? Was the question. And it was from my favorite YouTuber, and I started to think about it because if you watched the video that I had yesterday, what I'm basically saying is a resounding no. Like yesterday, I am essentially suggesting that society is not getting better or society is getting worse for people. And I kind of wanted to expand on that because what this guy was essentially saying was like, hey, every metric that we have, for the most part, society is kind of getting better, and it depends on which area you're looking at, and he's trying to have a very nuanced conversation. What I want is I want to focus on the statistics versus people's feelings. I want to focus on the kind of the points I was making yesterday, and I want to focus on maybe explaining myself a little bit better while trying to touch on subjects that are very hard to be accurate with. It's very hard to find proper language to describe some things. It's hard to talk about these big ideas without sometimes contradicting yourself. And it's hard to be right because, one, it's kind of an opinionated question, and two, there's going to be some areas where, depending on how you phrase it, you might end up changing your mind. I was thinking a lot about what I was saying yesterday, and I think it can be simplified by saying that we are cavemen in business suits. We're cavemen wearing ties, suits, outfits that really we really haven't adapted that well to modern day society. I was talking about mental health issues yesterday, and I think what I was trying to say is that the human brain is so flawed that it is wired for a completely different set of problems, situations, and threats, and benefits and rewards than we are accustomed today. People know this because the memes about it, I think, reflect what people generally are thinking in this regard, right? My favorite one is people today where it's like, oh my god, I've never gone skydiving and I'm gonna die. I regret my life. And like somebody from like 500 years ago is like, I've lived a very good life. I've had 2 grapes and once a pear. And he's like, I got the right boat age of 20. And that's kind of true. Like things were a lot grimmer. It was a very grim world. We had a lack of understanding with science and technology. I think the reason why people beg the question, is society getting better, is because we are essentially, how do I want to phrase this? I think that we are kings and servants at the same time. I think that the benefits of modern day society and science have given us and reaped rewards that our brains cannot fully appreciate. I think that we have grown accustomed to modern day life to the point to where we really don't understand the things that we have. And I think there's actually an argument to say that things are getting worse because the human brain is not wired for the constant information, for the constant signals of dopamine coming to our brains, for the food that we're eating, to be able to manage how much we're eating, to basically be the perfect person that society wants us to be. Now, I know what you're probably thinking when you're saying this. Brandon, you don't have to be a perfect person. You can be a flawed person. But think about how every single problem somebody has, how people react to it, how people engage with it. It's not just a cultural thing. It's a litany of people who argue with each other and disagree with each other, and very strong opinions about every aspect of our lives and different sources of information. And we have so much information that it kind of becomes difficult to even tell what the truth is sometimes. And a lot of times the information is just opinions with a statistic attached to it, so like the information itself is kind of fucking useless. And not to mention the fact that the science has also given us a couple of things that I think I think it's pieces of information that it's hard for the human brain to cope with. So let's kind of break down what I'm saying there, right? Somebody who's fat, it is very easy to say, hey, it is your fault if you're fat. Because it is. Your actions caused you to eat more. That made you fat. But like I mentioned yesterday, the human brain doesn't understand, hey, I need to make sure that I am eating appropriately, that I'm not gaining weight, that I'm looking pretty trim and nice for other people. I might understand that if it's being chastised, but for the most part, what does the human brain want to do? It wants to eat high calorie foods and store energy in the body because it is used to trying to make you survive. It's trying to make you survive. And unfortunately, your survival, the survival part of your brain is weaponized against you. Food is at the most caloric density that it can possibly be because it is fried and sugary. It's greasy, it's fatty, it doesn't have a lot of protein, so it has all of this energy stored inside of it, which tells your brain, hey, this is really good. Hey, I like this. Hey, more of this. Because if we are starving, then we will have extra fat storages to burn in case you are starving. Your brain only knows to push you to the next meal, to push you to trying to make you survive in a situation where you don't need to worry about survival. And because of that, you overeat. Your brain constantly tells you to keep going. And you might know, like, hey, I shouldn't be eating too much. But then you start learning about calories, and then you start learning about nutrition. And the human brain doesn't fucking know about that shit. It understands it to a point, and it'll tell you, it'll kind of make you crave things, right? If you have a low salt diet and your body's like running out of salt because it's sweating a lot, it kind of knows to tell you, like, hey, eat something salty right now. You really, really want something salty right now. But sometimes it just pushes you to eat things that you don't need, or it pushes you to eat too much of it. And our food companies know this, and they take advantage of it, and they push people to eating foods to the point to where it's slowly killing them. We have so much of good things that it's slowly killing us. And unfortunately, the human brain cannot coexist in modern day society without having some level of stress, without having some level of anxiety, without having some level of depression, to be honest with you, because because the brain is trying to survive in a world that needs you to be logical, functional, and act like a fucking robot. And that's kind of what society beckons from you. I think this is what, when I was writing my book, Life is Hard When You're Stupid, I think that's what I was trying to say, but I couldn't find the proper words. I think what I was trying to say is there's so many policies, rules, regulations, things to worry about, things that are used against you, psychological tricks that are played against you, to where it requires a lot more education. It requires you understanding a lot more, and even if you think you understand it or you spend a lot of time studying it, there's misinformation that can still lead you down the wrong path, to the point to where it's just impossible to live. It's either impossible or it's getting to the point where it's being impossible to live to where the standards of your actions are up to date. I don't think the standards of society is necessarily decreasing. I think it's increasing to the point to where it's not realistic. A perfect example, I think, in my opinion, is a clear point. We judge people's psychological problems, but I think a lot of these psychological problems are caused from society, and I think a lot of them are just problems with the human brain, to the point to where our society pretends like all acts of violence are unacceptable or is immature, and I think that we pretend like the reactions that we have to things are okay or are not okay, and we look at it through the lens of logic, but we don't look at it through the lens of being human. And because of that, people get arrested for common everyday arguments and situations, and sometimes fights break out because we are a species that's messy. And we have all of these rules that's trying to make it not messy. And I think that's what the problem is. It's the caveman brain looking at this, like looking at every aspect of its life to try to find the ideal version of it, especially one that exists in our society and in our culture, and struggling to balance it because it is a brain that just wants to do work, or it's a brain. It is nothing more than a brain that wants to eat energy, to store it, and to try to do as little as possible so you're not wasting energy. And we're constantly fighting against the habits of our brains. That is what society is. And I think that's why people say things are getting worse, because there is a disconnect between what society asks of you, what the human brain naturally does, and it's hard to bridge that gap because we think about things in such simplistic ways. We blame people for the problems that their brains cause them. We blame people for being depressed. We blame people for being anxious. We blame people for having ADHD even though there's a screen put in front of them 24/7. We blame people for being fat even though every fucking food company and fast food restaurant, every aspect of your fucking lives, especially in the United States, is just something that's high greasy and basically begging you to fucking eat it because your brain's like, hey. Your brain is wired to look at you and say, hey, that's like perfect for you right now. Hey, you should do that because if you go hungry, even if you're hungry and even if it's painful, you will survive longer. And that's what your brain does. And then we take that person, we take that caveman, we put it in a suit, we tell him to go into we tell him to go into an environment that has all of these tiny little stresses that requires its own little education and training and knowledge and experience and interact with other people. And then we blame that person for not being able to properly do so. I think that we have not evolved to the point to where we can actually exist the way society wants us to. And I think that more of our laws needs to take into account, and a lot more of our education needs to take into account, the flaws in human thinking. And I think that we're slowly getting there. We're slowly getting to a point to where we can make small changes to our society to where it is easier to exist in it. Because it's more than just, hey, do things and make money and go home. It's, hey, here's the pressure, here's all the social pressures, hey, here's all of these rules that you didn't know about, here's all these policies, hey, here's all of these things that you're being charged money every single month that you're not really keeping track of because you're not really used to keeping track of it because you're only used to really keeping track of your rations and things that are in front of you that you can see that are normally piled. It's just built against you. And things have gotten so complicated that, finance, like I said yesterday, like finance and economics, we have people who have studied these things for years and still can't agree on things because they're that complicated. And I think science has also made things very difficult for some people to find meaning, because we're people who want to tell stories, and your world and my world, that's like all there is, right? Like what I see in front of me is all that there fucking is. It's hard for me to care about what happens to some random guy in Russia or Ukraine or Palestine or Israel or fucking France or Germany, because I'm an American in Georgia and my proximity is like 50 fucking miles. I have some family around the United States, and because I know them, that's why I care about them. But everybody else, like, I have empathy for, but I don't care because I'm wired to only really care what's in front of me, and maybe a couple of long-term things. And to be honest with you, I would be wrong to say that there hasn't been a couple of things that science has discovered that makes it very difficult for people to be happy with what they have, because all we do every time we discover something is that there's something bigger than us that is a little bit more mundane, a little bit less of a miracle, and our existence becomes less significant. The more we understand about history, the more we learn about cultures that existed well before us that don't matter to us, and then you wonder, well, what's going to happen to me 1,000 years from now? I'm not really going to matter to anybody. That's something you have to cope with, and you have to cope with the fact that the solar system and the galaxy and our universe, from what we can tell, is so much bigger than what we comprehended, that now it's like, okay, well, there has to be other life at this point, because it's so big that it's kind of improbable. And then you start thinking, well, like, is all of our existence just like an accident, or is it just like another thing? And that becomes its own thing, and then people kind of double down on their religious beliefs to kind of ignore it, or they kind of just like it, or they just kind of like lean into it, and some people get depressed, and some people kind of just ignore it, and it's just it gets messy because we are storytellers. We need things to be a story, and I think that's the reason why, to humans, artists can sometimes be the most talented and smartest of us. Because I think that the best art conveys these things that we have a hard time verbalizing into a message and into a story and into a picture that expresses it and can be interpreted to be meaningful to us. Because we can't necessarily verbalize it, but we can understand it. And I think that that's why we need a little bit more art, and I think we need more time spent on art. And I think that we have to be more patient with each other. It's easy for us to look at a person who is angry, who is upset, who is stressed out, and view that person as having flaws. But really think about your life right now. What happens if your money disappears? What happens if your friendships start going south, or you make a mistake and then everybody hyper focuses on it as if you did something wrong, like on purpose, and you start getting treated worse for it, or you get neglected for it, and then you start getting isolated, and then your brain just starts fucking like, your brain will do things to you that cause you to be angry. Yesterday I got angry because I saw my bills increasing, and I got really fucking angry about it. And to be honest, because it's stressful, because I don't understand it, because I don't know why I have to pay $300 more a month than I was a few years ago for an identical apartment that hasn't improved. Actually, it's worse than the first time I had an apartment here. I don't understand what my rights are, even if I read them, because I need legal counsel to even be able to navigate the laws of our fucking country. We expect you to follow laws, but we also expect you to understand that laws are complicated and we need experts in it. We expect you to be healthy, but we understand that being healthy is complicated and you need doctors. And you can't just be your own doctor without some form of education. Because everybody who educates themselves will say some stupid fucking shit like, yeah, you need to drink raw milk and eat raw honey and fucking eat acai berries or some stupid fucking shit. Because there's always another article somewhere that says that makes up some health benefits or over exaggerates health benefits to the point to where now we have people who think that wine prevents you from getting cancer. We expect you to eat healthy, but we don't expect you to necessarily be told what's put in your food. There was an argument in my lifetime where food companies managed for a while to not have to tell you that they added sugar to your foods. That people don't realize that, like, the added sugars part of our nutrition labels is actually a recent thing. And with who's in office now, I wouldn't be surprised if that went away for a little bit. But like, we expect you to understand your rights without necessarily being told them. And so you never know, like, people's rights are violated on a day-to-day basis because they don't know about it. Or if they do know about it, they can't afford an attorney and the time it takes to take them through court. And court is like this overly expensive process for a lot of things. There's a lot of these complicated systems that each individual action makes sense. But as a whole, it is complicated and beyond human understanding. And so it's hard to find the flaws in what we do as a society. So it's hard to make improvements. And I think the reason why things aren't better is because we are kings that what we should be right now is we should be kings that have access to virtually anything because of the technology that we've invented for ourselves. And we are instead we are instead constantly distracted. We constantly have another thing you have to worry about. We constantly have another piece of information that you have to learn that will be out of date 2 years from now. We have too much information. We have too many things that we expect you to do. You can't just do a job anymore. You have to do 5 people's fucking jobs. And all of that's covered based on a job description that says also any other task that the manager deems necessary for you to perform. So long as it is not under the management's job description, maybe. We expect you to understand these very complicated and often contradictory things that people spend years understanding. And then we blame you for not doing so, and we blame you for being frustrated and angry about it. We blame you for being confused and scared in life because you don't have a big problem. Like, most people don't have a tiger or another tribe that's trying to kill them or anything like that. Like, things that are stressful and objectively worse, but you understand it. We have smaller problems, but we have a shitload of smaller problems. And we have so many smaller problems, and each one of those smaller problems, it's not hard by itself to understand, but it gets to a point where life gets so complicated you don't understand anything. Because it's just information everywhere you look. And then you're blamed for not understanding it by people who are experts in that field. You are called an idiot for the flaws that your brain gives you, and you are expected to reject the natural thought processes and intuitions that the brain has because it is flawed and is not meant to exist in modern day society, which is why some people crave a simpler lifestyle, because even if it's harder, even if they might die, they understand it. Now, do they really want to do it? No, because the human body's lazy and it wants to be lazy. There's a reason why we're lazy. It's not just a character flaw. It's your body trying to make you save and not expend needless energy. And you're blamed for that. You're blamed for your brain constantly telling you to not do things. Unless it's absolutely necessary. You're blamed for your brain doing these things. And I think that it's silly. It's technology has made it to where everything has improved and required so much expertise and knowledge to be able to function properly that we are just nervous little fucking wrecks. And I think that's why life is harder. Because we are... It would be like looking at a dog or a child and telling them the full responsibilities of an adult and expecting them to be able to do that. And we think because you have a couple more years under your belt that this is an easier thing to do, but there's always another thing that you have to worry about. And people are constantly moving around to go nowhere. My dad works harder than me. He works a lot more hours than me, and so does my fiance. And I have more money than both of them because technically I don't owe anything. I have no debt. And the lack of debt makes it to where I technically have more money than a lot of people. But I'm also not in the best position because it's not as straightforward as how much money you have. But that's what the human brain understands. And I think that until our brains adapt, until we have stronger genetics, I want to say. I think it's dangerous when you bring up genetics. But until like our gene pool naturally moves towards being able to resist these things a little bit more, being able to handle high concentration of carbohydrates, being able to handle a lot of small stressful situations and a lot of small decisions without getting exhausted, life will continue to feel harder for people, because it's, instead of one giant sword swinging at you that's possibly killing you or possibly not killing you, everybody just has a million paper cuts they have to go through every single day. And some days you can do it, some days you can't. Some people are fully capable of doing it, and just outright avoid certain aspects of their lives to be able to. That's why so many people ignore their health, because that's just something that they didn't have the mental energy to be able to do until it gets to a point where they have to, and then that becomes overwhelming for them. But at least it's a little bit more straightforward. It's just like, we don't have big decisions like, hey, what am I going to do right now? Or, hey, what am I going to do in the next 5 years? Or what career path am I going to have? It's constant small decisions. You know, what am I going to eat? What am I going to what am I going to eat? What am I going to do? What am I going to deal with these 5 million situations that I have at work, that where no one single situation is so important that the specific way that I do it really matters, so long as it's not such a bad way. But there's also a policy, but there's also a preference from my supervisor, but I think that this is probably the best way to do it, and I have to make a decision, but I also have to follow policies, but I also have discretion, but I don't have discretion. It gets complicated. And it's and you get to a point where you're just like, why the fuck am I doing this? Why am I doing? Why can't I just go for a fucking walk, show up to a place, do a fucking thing, and then go home? And then, like, you start asking that question, and every time you ask why, you're blamed for asking why, because because the drive for wanting to understand these problems and solving them turns you into the area of politics, and everybody's fucking toxic and hostile in that fucking area, to the point to where you're just, what the fuck am I even doing? Like, any opportunity that we have to solve problems is just ruined by people who fall into another pit trap that the brain has, where it's like the cult-like mentality, or it's like the tribalist mentality, where everybody, you know, groups together and thinks a very particular way, and because they have more people thinking that way, we have to think more extreme about it, and everybody who's not a part of this group is obviously the wrong person, and because you're wrong, we're going to associate that with you being an evil person or a bad person. And that's how you get to a point to where people have apathy for each other, and we have echo chambers for people, and we have more information in smaller groups of people, but it's echo chambers, and it's only information that confirms your beliefs, and nobody really challenges their beliefs. They only challenge other people's beliefs. And so nobody really grows, and then nobody really grows in the area of knowledge. They only grow for contempt for people who disagree with them. And that's another pitfall that our human brain has. And our politics will continue to be like this until we learn to think about things a little bit more generally, and we learn to be able to understand these complicated processes that we've created for ourselves in a way that makes it a little bit more simple, in a way that tells a little bit better of a story, in a way to where some of the things that require years of education become common sense. But we need probably generations and generations of people to be able to do that, and a complete reformation of our educational system for people to be able to understand these things. But we can't even agree on facts, yet we're expected to solve problems. I don't know. Hopefully what I said made sense. And again, there's probably some things I said that are wrong, some contradictions. I more just wanted to think outside of my normal parameters a little bit and let my brain kind of go loose. So if I said anything wrong, go ahead and tell me. I don't care. If you have something interesting to add to it, I would love to hear it. If you're interested in buying my books, because we live in a society where we're constantly having to sell things, but also some of the things that I said in my books are pretty interesting too. I'll put the link in the description. Have a good day.